Like most people on the right, the spiritual death of the West is always on my mind. But where I differ with most of my fellows is what I think it means for the future. The most likely religion to take over the white population is a Wotan/Odinist Norse paganism. The core of all religions is an ethnic narrative/ancestor worship. Just look at Judaism. This existed in Euro-Christianity as the saints who embodied both national heroes and ways to maintain pre-Christian specialized gods. Notably, Saint Martin was almost certainly not a historical personage, but an adaptation of the Roman god Mars. But those cultural traditions have slowly been stripped away as it became Judeo-Christianity, and European Christians have been left worshipping the ancestor narratives of an entirely different tribe and race. Norse paganism fulfills this role while allowing continuity with the past 1,000 years of European culture and traditions, since while the various Christian traditions wring their hands about stuff like the Crusades, King Arthur, Shakespeare's works, and the various national heroes of the 15th and 19th centuries, with all their violence and sex that now generations of Judeo-Christian priests have been desperate to distance themselves from. All of these figures and stories directly embody the Northern European values and archetypes of Norse paganism, and Odin's ideal of glorious deaths in battle specifically. Unlike in Abrahamism, you do not need to worship Odin to be called to Valhalla, merely embody the ideals and have some tie to Northern Europe. Indeed, for most of the past 1,000 years, the popular conception of the Father and Son drew as much from Odin and Thor as Yahweh and Jesus, with many depictions of Christ as a blonde, a 10 blue-eyed hammer-wielding carpenter looking suspiciously like the son of the all-father Northern Europeans were already worshipping. You can see this blending of Norse, Roman, and Christian symbols in the slang and profanity of Shakespeare's time. The curse, by Jove, takes the Roman slang for Jupiter, whilst the Christian conception of hell owes more to the Norse idea of hell combined with the Greek underworld than much of anything found in Scripture. Likewise, the major Christian holidays of Christmas and Easter have almost all of their secular associations, pine trees and elves, bunnies and eggs, derived from Yule and Easter, the Norse holidays of Odin and the fertility goddess. Even the popular conception of angels, that of winged women who appear to the dying to comfort them, are derived far more from Norse Valkyries than any biblical angels, who are never depicted with wings or as women. So why would modern white North Americans and Europeans convert to Norse paganism if they're already basically carrying on its traditions anyway? Why make a change if you'd just be slightly altering some of the names? Well, because of what it does not do. A modern Norse paganism, even a highly patriarchal one that just assumes Christianity was basically observing all the traditions more or less correctly and just keeps having choirs in semi-formal halls once a week, and just subbing out the words All Father for Our Father would have some distinct advantages. Such a superficial change removes all commitments and entanglements with the Middle East and Jerusalem in particular. The halls of Wotan lie in Asgard or Hyperborea, somewhere off the northernmost ocean, in the lands of the Aurora Borealis. Not in the only part of the Middle East without any hydrocarbons, but somehow with more wars than everywhere that has oil. Though Odin would have you die gloriously, he'd not have you die for Israel. Likewise, reading aloud from the tragedies of the Nibelungenlied, the sagas, or the histories and mythology of early modern Christian Europe, for they are also our ancestors, instead of Mark or Luke, removes all universalist commitments to go into the Third World, to reform the unreformable, and build the unbuildable, and more importantly, removes all egalitarian commitments to a brotherhood of man that would see us import the Third World here, under some idea that we might make them fellow believers equally entitled to our charity. Similarly, refocusing the role of sermons and services on curating history and mythology to create a shared identity and continuity with the past, instead of simplistic moral lectures for children, would perform the now pressing emergency-level function of drawing young men back into church. Likewise, whereas the Christian religion feels eternally compelled to export the wealth of Western communities into the black hole of Third World dysfunction, the ethnic religion of Northern Europe entails no such commitment. And finally, meekness, obedience, turning the other cheek, and other things that make for obedient children and serfs, but are poison to any honorable free people who would safeguard their liberty from the praying hands of the state, bureaucrats, and the moralizing priest classes that jump to collaborate with them. All of that can be jettisoned in favor of the honor-bound, warlike sentiments of historical and aristocratic Northern Europe. whereas early moderns practiced what I have termed European Christianity, a version of Christianity that at least until the late Victorians was compatible with gentlemen fighting duels of honor and romanticizing the Norse and classical pagans. We have descended into a high modernist Judeo-Christianity, in which all attachment to European ethnic identity is snuffed out and despised, and any of the warlike honor you might find in the tales of Beowulf, King Arthur, Shakespeare, or the Napoleonic Wars is actively suppressed as contrary to loving your neighbor as yourself, and the Leninist brotherhood of man. What European peoples in Europe and North America need is a massive re-emphasis of a purely European church that retains some Christian characteristics. This need not be a wholly violent break. Just as many North Europeans believed when they started worshiping the mysterious Yahweh and his son the carpenter Jesus that they were just adopting some new tales and expanded adventures of the mysterious Odin and his son the hammer-wielding Thor. Notably, Scandinavia maintained almost all the old traditions in some form or other. Likewise, such re-emphasis can go the other way, just as Odin Wotan was a mysterious traveler god of 1,000 different names, and Jesus was largely unaccounted for age 30. Who is to say Yahweh wasn't one of Odin's hundreds of names? Or that Jesus' adventures outside Judea did not overlap with the deeds of Thor or other Norse and Celtic heroes? Who's to say, like the other great heroes, Jesus didn't travel extensively in his youth and gain wisdom in the far corners of the earth, having many expanded adventures before his tragic demise? Indeed, there are proud European traditions hypothesizing just such expanded deeds. In the words of the English poet William Blake, "And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green?" Likewise, it is notable that 1,000 years of English men saw nothing odd with Arthur's knights seeking the Holy Grail in the British Isles. Such types of inquiry and hypothesizing were common prior to 1945, as well as mystics hypothesizing overlapping with Hinduism, Phoenician paganism, Greco-Roman paganism, and Zoroastrianism. However, all such came to a stop when America and the Soviet Union set about to systematically destroy European culture and identity, to make them easier to subjugate as a conquered people. It is for this reason that with the death of communism and now the slow deaths of American progressivism and EU soft communism that has replaced it, we should expect the entire world of Euro-spiritualism to take off to prominence again, now that mainline churches have completely hollowed out their cultural heritages. Modernism has drained itself of all passion and cultural interest. The old myths and blood memories cannot but fill the void. Indeed, one need only look at the worlds of heavy metal and counterculture to see sensitive, spiritually attuned young men and women have already been channeling the ancient gods and myths of Europe for decades now, in the disgust at all the unending problems of the modern world, and how they have infected formerly functional churches. Egalitarianism, feminism, third worldism, Zionism, postmodernism, legalism, and an aesthetic and spiritual relativism. A movement of European spiritualism and identitarianism is inevitable, and the ancient gods of European identity are already re-emerging.